Hey everybody, Tony D and Little Joan here. This is going to be a long one, so let me just breeze through the introductions. I'm Tony. That's Little Joan. Little Joan's bed is in the washing machine because Little Joan went to the vet, got some shots. So I gave her a bunch of yummy food. I got her little Caesars pack, well the half packs because she's so tiny, and she gobbled that, and then I gave her some more treats, and I think I gave her too many treats, and she threw up in her bed. So the bed's in the washing machine, and now Joan's on the cushion, which is her backup bed, and she's annoyed. Okay, you want to sit here or sit there? What's the? I got to do this thing. This is going to be a long one. Here, come over here. Let's see how long you'll last. Sorry, sorry everyone. All right, so this is about a Los Angeles Times op-ed. But first, before I read you the op-ed or some of it, I'll try to breeze through it. But this is what the Times says the editorial board is. The Los Angeles Times editorial board determines the editorial positions of the organization. The editorial board opines on the important issues of the day, exhorting. How do you pronounce that? Extorting? No, it's not extorting. It's exhorting, explaining, deploring, mourning, applauding, or championing, as the case may be. All right? The board, which operates separately from the newsroom, proceeds on the presumption that serious, nonpartisan, intellectually honest engagement with the world is a requirement of good citizenship. You can read more about the board's mission and its members at a link, which we won't go into. I'm sure it extols the virtues of, you know, their wonderfulness. Now this is Yahoo News, just reprinted it, so I switched over to that because there's fewer ads. And the editorial: our disastrous president. You see how nonpartisan it is? Listen to how nonpartisan and intellectually honest this op-ed is. Quote, having failed in his effort to thwart the voters' will and hold on to power, Donald J. Trump will leave the White House under a cloud of a second impeachment and facing the humiliation of a trial in the Senate for inciting an insurrection. Okay, lots of things to unpack here. He didn't thwart the voters' will, not from his position. His will is, I think we all know it, I can't say it on YouTube. And it's not about holding on to power per se. I mean, that's technically true, and that's why they like to put that word, that kind of phrase in there. But it's not about that. But the implication here is, oh, he's just got to hold on to power. That he will leave under the cloud of a second impeachment. Really? Not according to his fans. I mean, the only people who call it a cloud of impeachment, a cloud of a second impeachment, are the people who have been trying to impeach him since even before he got sworn in. So that's, I mean, this whole first opening is completely intellectually honest in my view. Facing the humiliation of a trial, is it? It will. First off, he may or may not. I don't think he will. I don't think they're going to try him. If they do, they would basically have to bang the gavel and call it a day to get it done before the 20th. And for inciting an insurrection, the Capitol Hill riot was not an insurrection. Insurrections have guns and weapons and a plan. Not a bunch of YouTubers wandering around vandalizing things. I don't support the riot. I think it was dumb and stupid. But I think calling it an insurrection is, again, intellectually dishonest. Continuing. But the Trump administration didn't just end badly. It was a disaster from the start. Okay, well, this is an op-ed, so you're allowed to state that opinion. But isn't it interesting that, you know, it took a whole board of people to write this? Like, anyone could have written this, right? If you said, write an op-ed from, you know, the media that hate Donald Trump, I mean, you could just write this. It would be easy. Continuing, the question of whether Donald Trump has been the worst president in American history can be debated. Yeah, it could. But again, I think you're really going to be lambasted by history here. But he clearly was one of the worst. Oh, it's to be debated, but don't debate it. It's to be debated, doggy, but don't debate it. There's no debate. We just told you. You can debate it, but there's no debate. Here, you want to go back? All right. Really making this a long video. He deserves that infamous description of not primarily because of poor policy decisions, though there were plenty of those, but because of his defects of character and temperament. Okay, so they're stating that it's poor policy and character and temperament. Mm-hmm. Did you ever heard of a guy by the name of George W. Bush? All right, you got to go on the floor. I'm never going to finish this. All right. Go away. Go get a drink. Continuing, yes, there have been presidents with personal failings who nevertheless exercised strong leadership and respected democratic institution. Aha! So now you're saying that the characters and defect and temperament aren't a big deal as long as you do the right thing. Have strong leadership, whatever that means. Respected democratic institutions? Yeah, he's done that. He's done everything legally. And strong leadership, I think you would be tough to prove that Trump was weak on anything. But from the time Trump took office, he displayed a constellation of flaws. Narcissism, yeah, that's pretty much every politician. Mendacity, that's a fancy word for being a liar. Again, every politician. An exaggerated view of his own ability. Again, every politician. And a chilling lack of empathy. Oh, yeah. I really don't agree with that. I think the guys who bombed the Middle East back into the Stone Age, they have a chilling lack of empathy. But I guess the hundreds of thousands of those brown people, they don't matter to the Los Angeles Times. And even though that Trump was trying to bring troops home and end those disastrous confrontations, he gets no credit for that. That infected his presidency and divided the nation. That infected his presidency, whatever, but divided the nation? I'm looking at the people who divided the nation. They're right here, hiding behind the board. Why don't you put a list of names? You're so wonderful and self-righteous and intellectually honest. Why don't you put your names out there on this? Why do you got to put the board? Continuing, Trump began his administration with a lie about the size of his crowd of his inauguration, and the fabrications kept coming. Okay. I think that could be debated. And it was debated hotly for some bizarre reason. But you kind of left out the part where radical leftists showed up on the first day, I shouldn't say well armed, but ready to go. See, this was my introduction to Antifa. When they showed up at the inauguration, I was like, who the hell are these guys? And they were all dressed in black, and a couple of them even were talking about having guns. I don't know if anything ever came of that, but they certainly were allowed to run around. And in fact, Twitter has just reposted the riot during Trump's inauguration from the leftist. Continuing, his presidency ends with Trump clinging to the fiction that the election that ousted him was, quote, rigged. The same fantasy that impelled his crazed followers to storm the Capitol on January 6th in a siege that led to 5 deaths. Again, it's like, that's your opinion, that it was fiction. It's so bizarre. I can't even refute this claim because YouTube would censor me. That's how truthful you are. You need to have people censored in order to have your argument work, right? And you're fine with that, I guess. I mean, censor everybody who says anything different about this election, which was the most secure ever. Honk, honk, wink, wink. And keep suppressing that information. I mean, that'll be good, right? I mean, the people who didn't get their vote counted. I'm sure they'll just go home and, donate to BLM like good citizens. Crazed followers? Well, there's some debate, and I can at least talk about this, on exactly who stormed the Capitol. I almost said castle. One was clearly a BLM guy, and he's being arrested. Did some stuff. Wore a Trump hat, and egged people on. And a siege. What did they have? Trebuchets and catapults. I'd hardly call it a siege. I'd call it a riot. I don't know if you call it a siege. It's a bit hyperbolic. Led to 5 deaths. Well, I guess, again, technically true. 2 people died of medical issues. One guy fell off a scaffolding. Not good. And then the cop, that was really bad. And then the woman who was shot, even worse. Trump began his administration with a lie. Oh, I did that one already. Continuing, in 2017, this newspaper published a series of editorials under the title Our Dishonest President, in which we drew a connection between Trump's contempt for the truth and other alarming features of his presidency, including his attacks on the news media, fake news, and his undermining of vital institutions such as the federal judiciary and the electoral process. So, you're linking to your old articles to justify why this op-ed is A-okay. You're quoting yourself. Wow. What, you mean you said it? Well, then it must be true. It must be confirmed. Well, I say this, and I said it months ago, or years ago. Well, you've got a source. You got me there. I wonder why he called you fake news. His undermining of vital institutions, such as the federal judiciary. Why? Because he appointed judges that weren't members of the party you obviously belong to, intellectually honest editorial board, and the electoral process, which he's done nothing illegal for. I mean, you guys didn't say... There's another thing going viral today of... Hollywood celebrities in 2016 begging electors, Republican electors, to just change their vote to Hillary or anybody other than Trump. Because they were so desperate to spin it for Hillary, and it's their right. They can make a video saying, please don't vote for Donald Trump, in a pathetic attempt to, just get electors to not do their duty. But if the Republicans did that, if the Republicans follow the law, well, then they're monsters. It's monstrous that these people follow the law. In the last editorial in that series, we said that Trump was, quote, reckless and unmanageable, a danger to the Constitution, a threat to our democratic institution. That was an accurate indictment of Trump in 2017, and it sadly proved prophetic about the way he has behaved since. See? I said it back then. I was prophetic. Therefore, I was right. What? Are you that? Did anybody else say, wow, the LA Times really nailed it with Trump? Did anybody else say that? Can you not find anybody else? I'm sure you could if you really tried. Continuing, take the outrageous abuse of power that led to Trump's first impeachment, his attempt to pressure the president of the Ukraine, a nation desperately dependent on U.S. security aid, to interfere with the U.S. election by investigating Joe Biden. Oh, you mean the Joe Biden who, in front of dozens of people, told a story and laughed about how he blackmailed the president of the Ukraine? Openly told it, and no one said boo to him or reported about it or demanded that he be impeached? Oh, no, not wonderful Joe Biden. Joe Biden's allowed to blackmail the Ukraine on behalf of his son, who was working for Burisma at the time. Don't you see? That's completely different. He's a Democrat. And we love Democrats, right? It's just unbelievable. And what happened to the Russian thing? You jump right to the Ukraine. What happened to the beginning when we were all about him being a Russian asset? No, I skipped over all that. What happened to the Mueller probe? Is that going to even be mentioned? That episode exposed Trump's inability to distinguish his own interest from those of the nation, according to the LA Times. A blind spot that has also figured in his refusal to admit he lost the 2020 election, in his contempt for Congress, the intelligence community, and career diplomats. Again, he has a different view. I'm not allowed to talk about it. See how strong your position is, that they have to censor people like me to not talk about it? As far as his contempt for Congress, Congress has a lower approval rating than head lice. So I'm pretty sure everybody has contempt for Congress. They're supposed to be, the people's house, and they rarely are, especially these days. The intelligence community, oh yeah, okay, yeah, let's make sure you back those liars. You're not a bunch of shills, LA Times editorial board, and career diplomats. Or do I repeat myself? During the WikiLeaks cables, something LA Times editorial board probably wasn't allowed to read. They exposed Hillary Clinton as using or suggesting that career diplomats could basically spy on other diplomats, at the UN to get their credit card numbers and such. But, I'm sure, Hillary, that was just email talk, with people like John Podesta, and, it wasn't really Hillary, But, it was her people, and, I'm sure those 30,000 emails wouldn't have shed light on it. Continuing, another character defect. Lack of empathy was evident in Trump's casual bigotry toward immigrants and people of color. What about the casual bigotry that George W. had for bombing the hell out of countries? Or, Barack Obama targeting assassinations to a guy who was a U.S. citizen, a Yemeni, and then his son. Yeah, it's very quiet. Very quiet coming from the LA editorial board, I imagine. That attitude was reflected in a series of disastrous policies. They range from a ban on travel to the United States, primarily directed at predominantly Muslim countries, to the separation of children from their families at the Mexico border in an attempt to exclude immigrants lacking documentation from the census count used to apportion seats in Congress. Okay, so this is another one. You got to break it down. So the Muslim ban, which is what the media called it. It was targeted to countries that we were having problems with, and it wasn't targeted on Muslims specifically. But that's the way the press pushed it. It wasn't about Muslims. It was about those countries. But hey, we should just keep letting people in. Maybe if we go to war with China, should we stop planes coming in from China? That would be racist. Separation from children under their parents at the Mexico border, which Obama started. So, what? Why do you keep blaming Trump for something that Obama started? Obama started that policy. And part of the reason he started it was because of the coyotes, who would literally rent children to total strangers to sneak across the border because they were less likely to be, prosecuted or persecuted if they had kids with them. It was like, oh, there's a family. Oh, no, we're going to help those poor people. But, they were just using the kids. And the attempt to exclude immigrants lacking documentation, those would be known as illegal immigrants. People in this country illegally. If you're going to have borders, and you're going to have laws regarding those borders and whether or not you can come in and come out, then you're going to have people who enter the country illegally. And you have to deal with what happens to them. They should be deported. They've entered the country illegally. But people on the left, they don't want borders. They're going to want them. By then it'll be too late. By then it'll be, it'll be chaos. You're essentially just going to crush wages. You're going to create a system in which, these people come to this country and they they get work because they're working for practically nothing and living in horrible conditions. Now, probably better than the countries they left until the economy completely collapses. But, there should be controls on the border, I think. Now, if you don't think that, I think you're, go live in a country with no border control and see what it's like, I would suggest. But leftists are just incredibly hypocritical on this. You just look at the Chaz. The first thing they did was put up walls and control the flow of people in and out of the Chaz. So, but I could go on and on. This goes on forever. Continuing, Trump portrayed himself as a champion of Black Americans, bizarrely boasting that he had done more for them than any president, with the possible exception of Abraham Lincoln. Why would he say that? Well, they tell you right here. Some of his policies, such as support for modest criminal justice initiatives, it was more than modest, but I'll just ignore your adverb, tax incentives for investment in economically distressed areas, and funding for historically Black colleges and universities may have benefited some Black Americans. Oh, now it's only some. That was pretty big. And Trump had the Platinum Plan, which was going to happen in the second term. Oh, but you killed that. But they are utterly overshadowed by other words, acts, including his claim that Black Lives Matter was a symbol of hate, and his racially frightened claim that a Biden victory would harm, quote, suburban housewives by destroying their neighborhoods with fair housing policies. Again, tons to unpack here. I mean, it just goes on and on. The intellectual dishonesty is just rife in every sentence. Utterly overshadowed by other words and acts. Okay. Including his claim that Black Lives Matter was a symbol of hate. Look, Black Lives Matter, we've talked about it a lot. We all know the deal. Their leaders they're on all over YouTube saying we are trained Marxists. Their own website said we're looking to deconstruct the nuclear family. These people are communist. They're Marxist and communist. They're radicals. And they have joined up with Antifa on many occasions. They have proclaimed looting to be reparations, amongst other things. Pretty hateful, I would say. Black Lives Matter has destroyed whatever goodwill they had. And a lot of Black people in this country realize that. And they don't like Black Lives Matter. They like Trump because Trump helped them get work and did lots of things for them. That's why Trump has the highest rating of a modern Republican in history for Black Latino voters. And that's why the Democratic Party needs to do this. They need to destroy Trump. They won't survive as a party without those votes. They just won't. His racially frightened claim that a Biden victory would harm suburban housewives, that assumes that, this is the racism of, I think, the Los Angeles Times. They're saying that all suburban housewives are white. All Black people are poor, essentially, with that. And, this idea of fair housing policies, it's complicated, but boils down to, giving the feds and the state the power to essentially redistrict suburbs to throw in a bunch of poor people. And you know what's going to happen to that? Exactly what happened in places like New York, where Trump was accused of this. You throw in enough poor people into a neighborhood, you drive down the property values, drive the people out, buy up the real estate, then drive the poor people out and relaunch the whole thing and make a huge profit. That's what it's for. It's not going to be used to give poor people a home and then pat them on the head and send them on their way. They're going to be used in a scheme to make money. That's what it is. It's what it's always been. They don't care about poor people. And the Los Angeles Times and their board, I don't think they care about poor people either. They virtue signal that they do because they have to pretend to be good people, but they don't actually do anything for poor people, in my view. Continuing, you could argue that Trump is merely continuing the politics of racial dog whistling that have animated some Republican candidates since at least Richard M. Nixon. Again, this is just a partisan slam. I mean, I thought you were non-partisan. This is like, well, we all know Republicans are racist, and, they've been doing this racism thing for a long time. Continuing, it was that, but also reflected how cruel and insensitive Trump words and deeds could be. I'm glad you're so nonpartisan and intellectually honest. The most damaging outcome of Trump's narcissism was his sabotaging of efforts to control the beer virus pandemic. I changed it to beer virus. Trump can legitimately take credit for his administration's commitment to developing vaccines at, quote, warp speed, but he undermines the larger efforts to contain the virus by minimizing its dangers. Well, again, intellectually dishonest. Trump was a guy who closed the border and tried to control it. He shut down flights to China while Nancy Pelosi and the Democrats took the opposite position simply because it was the opposite position. And people in the media hid that. They hide that. They don't want to talk about how Nancy Pelosi was in Chinatown going, oh, it's fine. We're out here in Chinatown. Implying that Trump was just racist against Chinese people. And if the danger had died down, that's exactly the tack they would have taken. They would have said Trump was a racist for shutting the flights to China. It cost us a lot of money and blah, blah, blah. It's just what Democrats do. They just take the opposite tact and hammer it away. Questioning the value of testing, promoting questionable treatments, and mocking the wearing of masks long before he exhorted his followers to fight like hell at the U.S. Capitol. Well, we jumped from beer virus to this. He urged opponents of beer virus safety measures to, quote, liberate their states, and in a foreshadowing of his friendly comments about the mob at the U.S. Capitol, expressed sympathy for the armed demonstrators who occupied the Michigan State House. Wow. See, they're just all over the map here. But what does it matter? Anybody who would read this and go, yeah! Do they even need to read it? I question whether they would get halfway through this before, oh boy, yeah, they really gave it to Trump. This is really just, I don't know what you'd call it. It's some kind of masturbation. It's some kind of mental masturbation. Maybe it's just for the people at the Los Angeles Times to feel like they did something. There's just so much here. We're jumping from beer virus to the Capitol Hill riot to Michigan State House, another place that I guess they're going to defend with Gretchen Whitmer, the Wicked Witch of Michigan. But, in a nutshell, you can criticize legitimately and honestly some of Trump's responses to the beer virus, but, what are you even going to compare it to? What are you even going to compare it to when you had a media that would just relentlessly attack the guy? He was giving updates every day from his the press briefing room, and they were getting huge hits on YouTube and on TV until Democrats realized, oh my God, it's driving his ratings up. Yeah, it was, because people were comforted by the fact the president was, out there taking an active role in talking about the virus every day, and it seemed like, wow, he's really working. It was good for him. It was great PR. And then suddenly there was this drive at CNN. Oh my God, we can't show any more of this. Why? Why? He's not a scientist. No, not one single Trump follower believes he was a scientist. So when he said stuff like, well, maybe there's some way we could turn this into a treatment, he was just talking off the top of his head. But these guys would take that literal in order to use it against them. But that's the media. That's the media. I think Trump's biggest mistakes, one of his mistakes, not a big one, but a mistake, was to stop those press conferences. I think he should have just kept doing them online. They were huge. I watched them every day. Oh boy, how much more of this? Oh, almost done. Continuing. Even those who believe that Trump promised a positive new direction for the Republican Party, which he has, and opening up the states, that's totally good advice, Opposition to the, quote, endless wars and free trade and support for the government investment at home, budget deficits be damned. Oh, now you care about budget deficits? Oh, yeah. I'm sure you're going to care about that when Joe Biden starts passing out money. Must recognize that he undermined his own agenda with his erratic behavior, inattention to detail, and ego-driven insistence on settling personal scores. Well, that's an interesting phrase there, because it sort of implies that he had an agenda worth not undermining. And you're saying that nothing he did was good, so then why do you even care that he undermined his own agenda? See, these guys live in a pseudo reality, or they're trying to prop it up, and this is an indication that they don't even believe it. If he was undermining his own agenda and he's a maniac, who cares? Who cares? Let him undermine it. That's a good thing, isn't it? If he's a terrible person and he does terrible racist things, isn't it good he undermined that? So there you go. And, inattention to detail, ego-driven insistence on settling personal scores. Where is that? I'll tell you who's got ego-driven instances on settling personal scores. Accuse your enemy of that which you are guilty, as the saying goes. The president's defenders can argue none of these failings prevented the Trump administration from achieving successes in domestic and foreign policy. Indeed, there were accomplishments. The president's defenders can argue that none of these failings prevented Trump administration from achieving success in domestic and foreign policy. Okay, what's left? Domestic is in the country, foreign is outside the country. That's everything. Indeed, there were accomplishments. Okay, you finally acknowledge them. Although Trump was wrong to boast that he presided over the, quote, the greatest economy in history of America, I don't know how wrong he is, unemployment did decline significantly during his administration before soaring in the beer virus pandemic. Oh, well, thank you for acknowledging reality, at least somewhat. With the cooperation of the Republican-controlled Senate, he placed 3 conservative justices on the Supreme Court and appointed more than 200 judges to the lower and federal courts. So how is that undermining the federal judiciary? I mean, are you acknowledging that he did a good job now? You just said he was just a disaster, and now you're saying, well, he did do some good things. Well, then he's not a disaster. Abroad, the administration successfully encouraged Israel and several Arab nations to normalize relations and rightly engaged the Taliban in negotiations designed to bring U.S. forces home from Afghanistan. Yes. Wow. But the president's overconfidence in his own abilities led him to think that flattering Kim Jong-un was the way to make progress on controlling North Korea's nuclear arsenal. Again, this is like, why do you say that? Like, you think that's all he did? I said some nice things about Kim Jong-un. Oh, he's doing some nice things. Okay. Now, there was a whole bunch of stuff going on. There was negotiations, real negotiation. And they brought South and North Korea together. Continuing. And his repudiation of the Iran nuclear agreement, seemingly motivated more by a desire to overturn the Obama administration achievement than by a desire to prevent Iran more effectively from developing nuclear weapon, was a strategic failure that alienated U.S. allies. I don't think it alienated the most important ally regarding Iran, which is Israel. They love him. If there's a statue built to Donald Trump, I promise you it'll be in Jerusalem. And it'll say something like, greatest U.S. president in history. So who are you talking about? Iran, again, you're overlooking all kinds of details here, but this is just the media's thing. Oh, he did it because, he hates Obama so much he wanted to overturn it. No, he genuinely disagreed that giving Iran back that money, which I still don't understand these days. We froze all of Iran's assets during the 79 revolution, and we held on to them for decades. And for some reason, they were managed well. And so all that money was, it generated more money. So when it was finally unfrozen and given back to the Iranians, there was a lot more of it. To which I would say, why did you do that? Why did you even give it back to them? Like, why would you? I wouldn't have given it back to them, but it's just strange to me. But that's what Obama did, and I guess it was a bribe to get them to behave. But did it work? Didn't seem to. Trump seemed to slap him down pretty hard when he murdered Soleimani. Now I don't condone that. I think that was going too far. It would have been a better way to do that, but it seems to have worked. I think that, again, the Los Angeles Times is just intellectually dishonest. Trump's legacy will be defined primarily not by his occasional achievements or even by his policy errors, but by the way deeply flawed man debased his office, stoked divisions, and brought democracy to the brink of self-destruction, all for the greater glory of Donald J. Trump. Whew. Okay. I guess that's an opinion. But there ain't nothing stopping history. And history will show that Trump did an amazing amount of stuff in one term. If he's never in the office again, you'll never take that away from him. The guy brought peace in the Middle East. And that is a lasting legacy. Not total peace, but, enough. More than any other president. So, intellectually honest and nonpartisan Los Angeles Times, good luck to you. I don't know why anybody calls you fake media.